When you're ready. Look at all the hands. All right, well, let's get started here then. Cody Westerland, you're up first.
Hey, Billy, I was just curious, how long into a season before you start putting stock in kind of some advanced statistics and lineup combinations and the numbers they bear out? 7 games is still early, but what's the point where you kind of put more stock in them?
I mean, I'm looking at that stuff all the time. Obviously, it's a small sample size, but I think you have to pair those numbers up with the game film. You know, I was in a situation, I think my first year in Oklahoma City, where we were playing San Antonio in the playoffs. And, you know, during the course of the year, the numbers said that Steven Adams and Enes Kanter were not a good combination together. And we had a very small sample size, but I went back and tried to watch film from those games. And it really had nothing to do with those two guys being on the floor together. And, you know, we ended up going with that lineup in the playoffs, and it was effective for us. So I think you can look at the numbers, but I think you always got to back the numbers up by watching film and seeing what the film says as well. Because, you know, a lot of times it can be a little bit misleading. And sometimes in the course of the game, somebody's playing maybe better than somebody else at that point in time. So rotation could change a little bit. But I'm definitely looking at the numbers. I think they're very valuable. I think they're important. I think it's great information to have. And it just, I think, allows you and puts you in a position to make more decisions and more, you know, educated decisions on things.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Darnell, go ahead.
Thanks, Kristen. Billy, my question's about foul trouble and your philosophy when it comes to guys maybe picking up their second foul. We've seen you a couple times now with Zach and maybe even Kobe stick with a couple guys when they've had a couple. What is your philosophy when it comes to that?
Well, I think the other night, you know, Kobe picked up 2 pretty early. I tried to, you know, trust the player. You know, I also try to make sure that player can kind of stay in a little bit of a rhythm. You know, it's awful difficult to, you know, pick up 9 minutes to go in the first quarter and then sit a guy all the way to the second quarter and try to bring him back. So, you know, it's a little bit risky. I would agree with that. You know, probably if he got his 30, be done for the half. So you could obviously wait, but I also think going with them a little bit is not all that bad, especially early in the game. You know, then obviously if they do pick up their third, you know, you'd have to be very, very selective putting them back in. But, you know, I'm fine taking a couple of those risks. I think it's important the players, you know, understand being smart and not putting themselves in harm's way. But again, I think if it's something like, you know, it's late in the first quarter and a guy's getting ready to come off the floor anyway, I'd probably be more inclined to take him out when he got a second. And I'll do that sometimes as well. But I think when some of these guys have gotten fouls so early, I've tried to show some trust in letting those guys play through some of that.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Jamal, go ahead.
Yeah, Billy, I wanted to ask you about the lineups as well. You start the game, obviously, with a very young starting lineup, and then that closing group. You know, you've got a couple of veterans off the bench at the end there with Otto, Thad, and Garrett Temple. Just what kind of balance are you trying to strike just between sort of developing some of the young players you guys have versus also winning? How do you sort of see that?
Well, I think our focus is trying to win. That's where we're at. You know, I think for Thad, I think for Garrett and OP, I think if you look at some of the things that they've been through, you know, Garrett missing most of training camp, you know, because of COVID, Thad dealing with a leg infection, missing quite a bit of time, and then OP's history the last couple of years. So, you know, I think we've got to be smart, you know, in terms of how we manage their minutes throughout the course of the season. Sometimes when those guys come off the bench, you know, you're basically eliminating the first 6 minutes of the game, and you've got more opportunity to utilize their minutes a little bit later in the game. But I think for those guys still this early in the season, limited training camp, you know, those veteran guys have been a calming force for the younger guys. I think they've done a really good job leading, talking to them, and being patient to help them along the way. But I've got a lot of trust and confidence in those veteran guys, not only on the floor in terms of individual players, but I think the presence they bring to the rest of the team. So, you know, again, we could probably have a lot of different starting lineups. I'm not that wrapped up in the starting part of it, you know, as much as I am like, what's the combination of players on the floor? How do we look, you know, in terms of, you know, length or athleticism, or who's in the game for the other team? Do we have good matchups? Obviously, the last few games have been somewhat challenging because we've had so many players out. And the rotation's been a little bit limited and the bench has been a little bit limited, but I think for the most part, Thad, Otto, and Garrett have done a great job of coming off the bench and giving us a spark and giving us really good energy.
Thanks.
Yep.
Joe Cowley, go ahead.
Yeah, Billy, Garrett's been on 10 or so NBA teams, so I'm sure he's seen his share of NBA players up close and personal. He said earlier today that he thought Zach was the most gifted, most athletic guy he's ever played with. What do you think the ceiling is with Zach? Have we seen the ceiling? Is it more about him learning how to win and there isn't a lot of growth for what he actually can do scoring-wise? I mean, what's your feel on him as an athlete and as a player in this league?
Well, I think the talent is definitely there. There's no question. What besides the 21 points in the first quarter the other night or the 39 points in the game, I mean, he's going to have games where maybe, he doesn't score like that. The biggest thing for me was his mindset and his aggressiveness to attack and to play. And then obviously he's got to make good decisions. But I think for Zach, it's got to be a consistent every night mentality for him, where he's coming to, with a mentality of, I'm going to be aggressive. I'm going to really kind of impose my athleticism into the game on both ends of the floor. And like I said, it's not like, hey Zach, you got to take 40 shots. But when he's playing downhill and he draws a crowd, he can make the game easier for the other guys. One of the areas I think sometimes we struggle with a little bit is, we don't have a lot of guys that can just break down the defense off the dribble. And Zach's got the ability to do that. So when he's not playing aggressively, it hurts us offensively. And I think for him, it's just really all about the shoulders up for him, in terms of he's such a team-orientated guy and he's such a good guy. And I think he tries to sometimes think about, others getting him involved, but he has got to stay aggressive and have that kind of mentality for the full 48 minutes. I thought he did a really good job in the Dallas game of doing that. And obviously he scored a lot of points, but we need that mentality out of him, when he's out there on the floor, because he is extremely gifted and talented. He has great athleticism and he's a really good guy and a really good teammate. And he wants to win. And he's obviously his first 6 years in the league. He's played in a lot of different teams, played for a lot of different coaches, a lot of different terminology, all those kind of things. But I think for him, he's got an incredible upside. But I think a lot of it's going to come down deep inside of, what level does he want to get to as a player? Because the talent's there. He's got to take it, I think, upon himself to be responsible for the aggressiveness that he displays each and every game.
Thanks, Billy.
Yep.
Casey, you're up.
Billy, this is a top 10 offense you're facing tonight. What do you want to see from your team defensively?
Well, they're really, really good in iso situations with McCollum and Lillard, in particular. Also, Carmelo coming off the bench. When they post him, they post Cantor. Again, we've got to provide really, really good help. I think our pickup points in transition are going to be critical with Lillard and McCollum because of their range to shoot the basketball. I think you look at the numbers of McCollum and Lillard in terms of how much they get to the free throw line and how many threes they're taking in the game. They're extremely explosive. We're going to have to do a great job collectively, as a group, being in really good position. We cannot foul. We fouled way too much against Dallas. It's been an area of inconsistency for us, and same thing with the turnovers. But it's not going to be, Kobe against Lillard or Zach against McCollum or Thad against, Carmelo or, Gaff or Wendell against Cantor. We've got to do it together, as a group. They obviously have got a lot of firepower on the floor. Even that second unit is really gifted offensively, but we're going to have to do it collectively as a group.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sam Smith.
Billy, apropos no specific game, but why do you play offense in front of your bench in the second half?
Yeah, I just always, I think from a play calling standpoint, just for me, I've always liked having that. Other teams I've had in Oklahoma City, those guys liked having the defense in front. For me personally, checking with the players, I like it there. I think the play calling, is a little bit easier, coming down the late game to help those guys in terms of us getting into offense and what we need to do offensively. And I think sometimes they're going to miss shot or a made basket, the ball's down the floor. It becomes a little bit more challenging. I think it's a way just for me to maybe to help the group a little bit from the bench as best I can. So I've always kind of preferred that, as a coach. But everybody's a little bit different, in those situations. I know there's some teams, I think maybe San Antonio and Boston do it. There's maybe some other teams that obviously most of the team in the league do it the other way, with their defense in front of their bench.
Thanks.
Yep.
All right, we'll take one more from Christos.
Hello, coach.
Hello.
I would like to ask you, it's obvious that Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, and Carmelo Anthony are the players who can score with a lot of ways, but how important for your team and for your game is to control the rhythm about the rebounds, and how important is to cut the pace of players like Nurkic and Kanter?
Well, I think the rebounding is huge, especially from the free throw line. Carmelo's a great free throw line rebounder. Kanter is just a great rebounder all the way around. But with the shots that go up with Lillard and McCollum, we're going to have to be able to put a body on people. And I think there's going to be a lot of things we're going to have to do really, really well in this game when you're playing against an elite offensive team. They get to the free throw line, they shoot threes, they post up, and they get to the free throw line. And all those things, when they don't score, they give themselves opportunities to offensive rebound.
Thank you.
Thank you, Coach.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Billy.
Thanks, guys.